The day I realized I was being watched, I didn't find the tracker because I was being careful. I found it because I was careless. That's the part that still bothers me. If I'd been paying attention, if I'd followed my instincts, if I hadn't trusted the wrong person at the wrong time, none of this would have happened. But then again, if it hadn't happened, I might still be living in a very comfortable lie. My name is Margaret Hale. I'm 65 years old, widowed for just over 3 years, and until recently, I believed my life had finally settled into something quiet and predictable. Predictable is a dangerous thing to believe in. My husband, Thomas, died the way men like him usually do, quickly, without drama, and while doing something practical. He collapsed in our driveway while washing the car, hose still running, water pooling around his shoes like the world hadn't gotten the memo that he was gone. 41 years of marriage ended with a heart attack and a clean sedan. I'd loved him deeply, but I won't pretend grief made me helpless. I handled our finances, always had. Thomas handled the gutters and the Christmas lights. I handled the investments, the retirement accounts, the long game. By the time I was alone, I was also financially independent. That combination, older, widowed, and wealthy, changes how people look at you. Suddenly, everyone wants to help, especially family. My daughter Lauren had married Evan Brooks 4 years earlier. Evan was charming in the way men learn to be when charm is useful, polite, attentive, just the right amount of concerned. He worked in asset logistics, which I later learned was one of those phrases that meant whatever the speaker needed it to mean in the moment. At first, Evan barely noticed me. He and Lauren were busy building their lives, which I respected. I didn't hover. I didn't interfere. I was the modern, sensible mother who knew when to step back. That changed about 6 months after Thomas died. That was when Evan started checking in. "How's the house holding up, Margaret? Are you driving enough to keep the battery healthy? Have you had the car looked at lately?" At the time, it felt thoughtful. Grief makes you grateful for attention. Loneliness lowers your defenses. You start mistaking concern for character. So when Evan mentioned, casually, that my car was overdue for maintenance before my upcoming trip, I didn't question him. "You're driving out of state alone," he said. "I'd feel better if I took a look at it. I'd feel better." That phrase should have set off alarms. Instead, I handed him my keys. The next day, I went to pick the car up from the mechanic Evan trusted. He'd already paid, already arranged everything. I remember thinking how lucky Lauren was. That's when I dropped my purse. It slipped off my shoulder in the parking lot and spilled across the concrete receipts. Lip balm, old grocery lists, the organized chaos of a woman who plans but never quite purges. I bent down to gather it, and that's when I saw something that didn't belong. A small black rectangle, magnetized, tucked just behind the rear axle. Perfectly placed. Perfectly hidden. Perfectly deliberate. I didn't scream. I didn't gasp. I didn't even touch it at first. I just stared. Because once you've lived long enough, you know instinctively when the ground has shifted beneath you. I reached out and pulled it free. It came away easily, too easily, a tracker. I sat in the car for nearly 15 minutes without starting the engine. My mind didn't race, it slowed. Who would do this? Why? And why now? There was only one person who'd had unsupervised access to my vehicle, and that realization hurt more than fear ever could. I drove home, calm on the outside, dismantling my life on the inside. That night, while Lauren slept upstairs and Evan texted polite check-ins, I researched GPS trackers until dawn. What I learned was simple. They weren't rare, they weren't expensive, and they were almost always used for one thing: surveillance. By morning, I had a decision to make: confront him, call the police, pretend I'd never found it, or turn the tables. There was a truck stop 20 miles east of my house, right off the interstate. Long-haul routes, cross-border traffic, Canada. I removed the tracker, sealed it in a magnetic casing, and drove out there just after noon. I chose a semi headed north. No reason, just distance. I attached the device underneath the trailer, stepped back, and watched it pull away. Then I went home and waited. The phone rang the next morning. Unknown number, foreign area code. I answered. "From Mrs. Hale," a calm voice said. "This is Constable Andrew Miller with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. We have a situation involving your photograph." The room tilted, and I knew in that moment that I hadn't just uncovered a secret. I triggered something much larger, much darker. And whoever had been watching me was about to realize I was no longer where they thought I was. When a foreign police officer knows your name before you speak, your body understands the danger before your mind does. "Mrs. Hale," Constable Miller repeated, his tone steady, professional. "Are you somewhere safe right now?" That was the wrong question. Yes, I said, even though I wasn't sure what safe meant anymore. I'm going to need you to listen carefully, he continued. Early this morning, our officers detained a man at a truck stop outside Red Deer, Alberta. He was attempting to retrieve a tracking device from a commercial vehicle. When we searched him, we found several personal items that belonged to you. My fingers tightened around the phone. What kind of personal items? There was a pause, the kind officers use when deciding how much truth a civilian can handle at once. A printed photograph of you, he said, your home address, notes detailing your travel schedule, and a list of names labeled family contacts. The air left my lungs. I don't understand, I said, and for the first time since finding the tracker, my voice betrayed me. Neither did we at first, Constable Miller replied. Until we traced the tracker's serial number and realized it had been registered in the United States less than a week ago, under a name we believed to be false. I sank into the nearest chair. What was this man planning to do? We believe, Miller said carefully, that you were being prepared for an abduction scenario, either real or simulated. Simulated. The word chilled me more than the alternative. That was when he said the sentence that changed everything. He was instructed to contact someone named Even once he confirmed your location. I closed my eyes. The room was suddenly too quiet. Constable Miller explained that the man Caleb Rourke, a known associate of organized theft rings, had been arrested before he could make contact. He'd panicked when officers approached the truck, tried to flee, and dropped his phone. That phone told the rest of the story. Encrypted messages, payment schedules, contingency plans, all tied to one name. EB initials decoded. Mrs. Hale, Miller said gently, we strongly recommend you contact your local authorities immediately. Whoever set this in motion may realize something has gone wrong. After the call ended, I sat alone in my kitchen for a long time. Lauren was at work. Even would be home by 6, and somewhere between those two facts was a truth I didn't yet know how to survive. I called the police, not 911, not in a panic. I called the non-emergency line and asked for a detective. Her name was Rachel Monroe. She arrived within the hour, calm, sharp-eyed, and already briefed. Mrs. Hale, she said, sitting across from me, I'm going to be very direct with you. We believe your son-in-law has been monitoring you with intent to commit a serious felony. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because the alternative crying felt like surrender. I need to understand why, I said. That's all I care about right now. Detective Monroe nodded. Then we'll start there. What followed was a slow, methodical unpeeling of a man I thought I knew. Evan Brooks had debts, large ones, not student loans, not medical bills, gambling, 6 figures. And not to casinos with loyalty cards and customer service desks. To people who expect repayment on their terms. The plan, as best as law enforcement could tell, was brutal in its simplicity. Track my movements, identify when I was alone, stage an abduction scare. Lauren would panic. Evan would handle it. Money would move fast. And afterward, I would be traumatized, dependent, and grateful. Perfect. Except for one problem. I had found the tracker. You saved yourself, Detective Monroe said quietly, without knowing it. No, I corrected. I delayed something worse. She didn't argue. That evening Even came home smiling. He kissed Lauren on the cheek, asked about her day, and checked on me with the same concerned voice that now sounded rehearsed. How was the trip planning going, he asked. Fine, I said, watching him closely. Quiet. Good, he replied. You know, with everything going on these days, it's important to stay predictable. Predictable, I smiled back. That night, while Even slept in the guest room and Lauren scrolled through wedding venues upstairs, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him yet. I wasn't going to run. I was going to let him believe his plan was still intact, because the most dangerous moment for a predator is when they think they're still in control. There's a particular kind of silence that settles into a house when trust dies. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't slam doors or raise voices. It hums, low, constant, watchful. For the next 3 days, I lived inside that hum. Even went to work. Lauren planned her wedding. I drank my coffee and smiled and pretended nothing inside me had fractured. But behind that calm, I was preparing. The first thing I did was call Howard Klein, my accountant. Howard has been managing my finances since before Lauren learned to drive. He knows my habits, my redundancies, my paranoia. If something changed, he would see it. Howard, I said, closing my office door. I need you to do a forensic review of my accounts. Last 2 years. I want everything. Then, quietly, give me 48 hours. Next, I called Alina Ruiz, my attorney. Alina doesn't sugarcoat, she doesn't comfort, she dissects. When I told her about the tracker, the remp, and even, she exhaled slowly. I want you to promise me something, she said. You won't confront him alone. I won't be alone, I replied. That wasn't a lie. By Wednesday afternoon, the truth began to arrive in pieces. Howard called first. Grit, he said. Someone has been bleeding your accounts. How much? $39,812. I closed my eyes. Small transfers, he continued. Clever ones. They're coded to look like utilities, insurance, routine expenses. Whoever did this knows your spending patterns. Could it be an error? No, Howard said gently. This was intentional. I thanked him and hung up. Then Alina called, and her news was worse. Evan Brooks is not his real name. Of course it wasn't. He's used at least 3 identities in the last 10 years, she continued. Different states, same pattern, relationships with older women connected to money. Did he target them directly? Yes, she said. You're not the first. You're just the first who noticed. I sat in my study that night, surrounded by old photos of a life I thought I understood. Thomas at 50, Lauren at graduation, family holidays that now felt staged. Iban had inserted himself into all of it, and he'd done it patiently. That was the part that scared me most. Detective Monroe called the next morning. We think he's getting nervous, she said. His communications have spiked. He's moving assets. Is he planning to run? Yes. When? Soon. That settled it. If I waited any longer, he'd vanish, and Lauren would be left with questions that would haunt her for the rest of her life. So I did something that surprised even me. I invited him to dinner, Friday night, just family. I told Lauren I wanted to talk about wedding finances. Evan seemed relieved. Good, he said. I've been worried about the budget. I'm sure he had. That afternoon, I set the table with my best china, not out of sentiment, out of symbolism. If this was the end of something, I wanted it to be deliberate. Avon arrived with wine and practiced charm. Lauren followed, glowing, hopeful, unaware. We ate, we laughed, we played our roles. And then, when the plates were cleared and the room was quiet, I spoke. Evan, I said calmly, why did you put a tracker on my car? The silence that followed wasn't hum, it was rupture. Lauren froze. Evan blinked once, twice, then he smiled. Margaret, he said softly, I think you're confused. I reached into my purse and placed the tracker on the table. I think, I replied, you're out of lies. For a moment, none of us moved. The tracker sat between us on the polished wood table like a live wire. Small, black, silent. Lauren looked from it to Evan, then to me. Mom, she said carefully, what is that? Sweetheart, he said, voice warm, soothing. Your mother's been under a lot of stress lately. I think she may have. Don't, I said, not loudly, not angrily, just final. Evan's hand froze mid-air. Answer the question, I continued. Why did you put a GPS tracker on my car? Lauren's face drained of color. What? She whispered, even leaned back in his chair, buying time. He didn't, he said. I don't even know what that is, I nodded. That's interesting, because the Royal Canadian Mounted Police seem to think you do. That did it. The smile slipped, just for a second, but it was enough. What are you talking about? Lauren asked, her voice shaking now. I took a breath. This was the moment I'd been dreading. Lauren, I said gently. That tracker was attached to my car while Evan had my keys. I removed it and sent it north on a semi-truck. Yesterday morning, Canadian police arrested a man trying to retrieve it. He had my photograph, my address, my schedule. Evan stood up. Okay, he said quickly. This is getting out of hand. No, I replied. This is coming into hand. I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table to Lauren. Bank statements, transaction summaries, dates. He's been taking money from my accounts, I said. I can stretch is for over a year. Lauren's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. Ivan, she whispered, tell me this isn't real. Ivan looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't lie. I was going to fix it, he said. The words hit her like a slap. Fix what? The pressure. I never meant for it to go this far. My heart hardened. You hired someone to stalk me, I said. You planned to terrify your wife into paying a ransom. It wasn't kidnapping, Ivan snapped. It was a scenario. No one was supposed to get hurt. Lauren staggered back like he'd struck her. You were going to let me think my mother was gone. Silence. That was answer enough. The knock at the door came right on time. 3 sharp raps. Ivan turned, too late. Detective Monroe entered with 2 uniformed officers. Ivan Brooks, she said. You're under arrest. He didn't resist. He just stared at me. You think you've won, he said quietly. I think you underestimated me, I replied. Lauren collapsed into my arms as they took him away. She cried the kind of cry that breaks something open inside you. I didn't see it, she sobbed. How did I not see it? Because you trusted, I said, and trusting isn't a flaw. Outside, the police car pulled away. Inside, a chapter of our lives ended. If Evan Brooks had stopped when he was arrested, this would have been a story about survival. But predators rarely accept the end quietly. They look for one last angle, one last manipulation, one last lie powerful enough to drag someone else down with them. The investigation unfolded faster than I expected. Once Evan was in custody, the illusion collapsed. Detective Monroe called me daily with updates that made my stomach knot tighter each time. He's done this before, she told me on Monday morning, at least 4 times. 4 women, 4 lives disrupted, 4 fortunes eroded, different states, different names, same method, patience. He didn't just steal, Monroe continued. He embedded himself, learned routines, identified pressure points. He planned exits years in advance. Lauren struggled with the truth more than I did. I think that's because I'd already mourned once. She was mourning a future that never existed. The charges stacked quickly. Wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and then came the twist. Ivan decided to talk, not to confess. To accuse. Elena, I said into the phone. Tell me he didn't do this. She didn't answer right away. He's claiming you were involved, she said finally. That you knew about his activities, that you helped him. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. On what planet? The desperate one, she replied. He says you discovered his schemes months ago and agreed to take a percentage. My stomach dropped. What does the prosecution think? They think it's nonsense, Elena said. But he's forcing the issue. If he testifies, he'll try to paint you as the mastermind. The audacity stunned me. He tried to kidnap me, yes, she said, and now he's trying to save himself by destroying you. The trial began in January. Cold air, hard benches, no illusions left. Lauren sat beside me every day. Even though, whoever he really was, sat across the room looking smaller, grayer, and angrier. His lawyer called him to the stand, and that's when he made his mistake. He spoke for hours, about methods, about targets, about how he chose women like me. He explained everything. Then he turned to me. She wasn't a victim, he said. She was my partner. I didn't react. I didn't need to. Because when my attorney stood, she didn't ask emotional questions. She asked factual ones. Name one victim she helped you target. Silence. Name $1 she received. Silence. Explain why a woman conspiring with you would send your tracker to Canada and alert police. Silence. Each lie collapsed under its own weight. By the time he stepped down, he confessed to crimes the prosecution hadn't even known about. Education for seniors, financial awareness, protection. Lauren runs it now. She's brilliant, strong, wiser. As for me, I still drive the same car. I still drop my purse, but I look under it now, every time, because some lessons are expensive and some are priceless. People think closure feels like relief. It doesn't. It feels like standing in a quiet house after a storm, listening for damage you haven't discovered yet. Even sentencing came and went, and the world moved on faster than I was prepared for. News cycles don't linger on elderly women who outsmart criminals. There were no headlines, no interviews, just paperwork, signatures, and a polite handshake from a prosecutor who had already turned his attention to the next case. 27 years. That was the number everyone focused on. What no one talked about was what happens to the people left behind. Lauren didn't cry anymore. That worried me more than the tears ever had. She became efficient, organized, hyper-competent in a way that felt armored. She double-checked locks. She stopped trusting compliments. She flinched when strangers asked personal questions. One night, weeks after the trial, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and asked quietly, "How do you know when someone's being kind and when they're just studying you?" I didn't have an easy answer, so I gave her an honest one. "You don't," I said. "Not right away. You learn to watch patterns instead of promises." She nodded like someone filing that away for future survival. The restitution checks arrived slowly, small amounts, inconsistent. Her money taken from accounts, even had hidden under false names, shell companies, and borrowed identities. It didn't matter. I didn't need it, but I knew the other women did, so I tracked them down. Margaret in Florida, Helen in Arizona, Janice in South Carolina. 3 women who had once believed they were alone in their shame. They weren't. We spoke on the phone first, then by video, then eventually in person, and something extraordinary happened. When we told our stories together, the shame lost its power. Predators survive on silence. But community destroys them. That's how the foundation truly began. Not as a charity, as a warning system, workshops, simple checklists, questions people were never taught to ask. Who has access to your keys? Who benefits if you panic? Who profits from your trust? We didn't teach fear, we taught awareness. 6 months later, I received a letter from a federal prison in Pennsylvania. No return address. Just a name I didn't recognize. Inside was one sentence written carefully, deliberately: "You ruined everything." I folded the paper once, then again, and dropped it into the fireplace. Here's the truth no one tells you. I don't feel safer than I did before all this. I feel stronger. And there's a difference. Safety is passive. Strength is earned. I still drive alone. I still travel. I still trust, but selectively. And every once in a while, when I park and drop my purse, I look underneath the car. Not because I expect to find something, but because I know now that paying attention saved my life. If you're listening to this and thinking this could never happen to me, that's exactly what I thought too. And if my story made you pause, even for a second, then it was worth telling.